Hi everyone, Athena here. The Atlantic slave trade was huge. It was one of the most significant and devastating events in human history, affecting millions of lives and shaping the world in ways that are still felt today. It lasted over 400 years. From the early 1500s to the late 1800s, this brutal trade spanned centuries, leaving a lasting impact on continents and cultures. Think about that, 12 generations. Entire families were torn apart, and the effects rippled through countless lives, altering the course of history for many nations. Over 10 million Africans were taken from their homes and shipped across the ocean. These individuals were forcibly removed from their communities, their cultures, and their loved ones. It was a terrible time in human history. The sheer scale of human suffering and the inhumanity displayed during this period is almost unimaginable. These people were kidnapped and treated like objects. They were seen as mere commodities, stripped of their dignity and humanity. They were chained and crammed onto ships. Conditions were horrible. The ships were overcrowded, unsanitary, and many did not survive. Lots of people died on the journey, which was called the Middle Passage. This leg of the trip was notorious for its brutality and high mortality rates. This trade wasn't just about moving people, it was about making money. The economic incentives drove this inhumane practice, as European traders and plantation owners sought to maximize their profits. Europeans wanted workers for their plantations in the Americas. They needed labor to cultivate crops like sugar, tobacco, and cotton, which were highly profitable. They didn't care about the humanity of the Africans. To them, these people were just a means to an end, a way to generate wealth and power. The slave trade changed the economies of 3 continents. In Africa, it brought chaos and instability. It tore apart families and communities. The Americas were built on slave labor. Sugar, tobacco, cotton, all these crops were profitable because of slavery. It made some Europeans very rich. But this wealth came at a terrible price. It was built on the backs of enslaved Africans. Their forced labor fueled the growth of the Western world. Imagine being crammed into a ship's hold. The air is thick and suffocating, the darkness almost complete. You can barely see the person next to you, but you can feel their presence, their fear, their despair. Hundreds of people chained together, their bodies pressed against each other, unable to move. The chains clink and rattle with every slight movement, a constant reminder of their captivity. No space to move, barely any air to breathe. The stench was unbearable. The smell of sweat, excrement, and fear filled the air, making it almost impossible to breathe. This was the Middle Passage, a journey that lasted weeks, sometimes months, across the vast Atlantic Ocean, a journey that was a living nightmare for those who endured it. From Africa to the Americas, the seas were often rough, the conditions on board even rougher. Many did not survive the journey. Many died from disease, starvation, or despair. The conditions were so harsh that death often seemed like a release from the suffering. Those who survived faced a life of hard labor. They were sold into slavery, forced to work in plantations under brutal conditions, with no hope of freedom. The Middle Passage was a symbol of the cruelty of the slave trade. It represented the inhumanity and brutality that millions of people were subjected to. It showed how little regard the slavers had for human life. They saw the enslaved as mere cargo, to be transported and sold for profit, with no consideration for their suffering or humanity. Next, more than chains, the human cost of slavery. Slavery wasn't just about physical labor. It was about crushing the human spirit. Families were torn apart, cultures were ripped away. Africans were treated like animals, not human beings. They were beaten, abused, and denied their basic rights. But even in the face of this horror, their spirit endured. They found ways to hold on to their traditions. They sang songs of freedom. They resisted their oppressors in big and small ways. Echoes of injustice, the legacy today. The slave trade may be over, but its legacy lives on. The remnants of this dark chapter in human history are etched into the very fabric of our societies. Racism, inequality, poverty, these are all connected to the history of slavery. The systemic structures that were built to oppress continue to affect the lives of many, creating barriers that are difficult to dismantle. We see it in the struggles of Black communities around the world. From economic disparities to social injustices, the echoes of slavery reverberate through generations. We see it in the fight for equality and justice. Movements like Black Lives Matter highlight the ongoing battle against the remnants of this oppressive past. The past is never truly gone. It lingers in the places where history was made, in the stories passed down through generations, and in the continued quest for recognition and reparation. It's important to remember this history. By educating ourselves and others, we can better understand the roots of current social issues and work towards meaningful change, to understand how it still shapes our world today. The conversations and educational efforts are crucial in bridging the gap between the past and the present. Only then can we truly move forward. By acknowledging and addressing the legacy of slavery, we pave the way for a more just and equitable future for all. Lastly, never forget, honoring the past, shaping the future. Remembering the slave trade is painful, but it's also necessary. We must honor the millions who suffered and died. We must learn from this dark chapter in human history. We must fight against all forms of racism and injustice. This is our collective responsibility. By remembering the past, we can work to create a better future. A future where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. Athena signing off.